after my parents divorced, my mom would often say to me, God's your father. He's your real father, your earthly father. He doesn't want to be involved, or he doesn't care, he's full of sin, or like whatever. But don't worry about him, because you have your heavenly father.
Welcome to Voices of Deconversion. We share the inspirational stories of deconversion told by former Christians who are now atheist or agnostic. Our stories remind us we're in it together. They encourage us as we discover who we are and help us to embrace who we become. Now here's Steve with today's guest.
Welcome back for episode 18. My guest today is from Chattanooga, Tennessee. He was raised Seventh Day Adventist and very devout growing up. He was homeschooled through most of his childhood and moved around a lot because he was from a military family. He loves music, and he also creates his own music, which you can listen to at berryorchestra.bandcamp.com. This is part one of a wonderful conversation that I had with Stephen Berry. Be sure to tune in for part two, which will be released early next week. And finally, ignore the train. It doesn't last long. And I hope you enjoy the interview as much as I did. Very happy to be joined today by Stephen Berry. Stephen, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. This is a super cool opportunity.
So as far as your music goes, I guess what do you enjoy most about creating music? How'd you get into it?
I think I actually didn't start getting into music until I was like 7. Like, I didn't like music at all before I was 7. And then, my family, my mom and my dad, they're really into like gospel music. And, they had records playing all the time. And I think I heard like a CeCe Winans record. And I was just like, okay, maybe this music thing isn't so, bad. I don't know what I thought about music before that. Like, I literally can't remember. But this is just like, that was like the turning point. It's like, okay, now I'm going to I just listened to everything that we had in the house, and which was only Christian and gospel music. Because like any secular stuff was just like a no. They got rid of all of their secular albums before I was born. So, but I would just be like, I would listen to like every little sound, and like I would look at like the timing on like the little timers. It's like, oh, like a lot of times when it gets to this point in the song, this thing happens or whatever. So like I just, those are things that I did, and I didn't have internet until right before I went to college. So, and I didn't have cable for a big chunk of my teenage years. So partially I think that was because my mom didn't want to pay for it, but I also think it was also to like kind of shelter us a little bit so we wouldn't have like access to a lot of things.
Yeah.
And that's just my theory. I could be wrong. But I just kind of got into like, playing around, like I was in a small town, nobody, homeschooled, so I'm playing around on this old computer, and, I find like this old program that's really not meant to be used for anything but just to record sounds. And then maybe it has the option where you can mix one file with another file. Well, let me play around, like I'll just beatbox or like whatever, and then I'll like throw some other sounds in there. And then I started making tracks like that. This is like very ancient. It was like an old computer with no memory, but I just kept playing around with it, and it was just an experiment. I kept playing around with it, and then I got my own laptop, and I got some more software. So I was producing stuff. I was making like parody rap songs.
That's cool.
And I wanted to get serious about it, and I wanted to make like this super amazing Christian rap album. Like that was like, I want it to be like have like the greatest beats and like really good lyrics but not cheesy.
That's funny.
Spread the good news but not be like, like, oh, that's Christian. You don't want to hear that. That was kind of my goal, and I spent a lot of time writing, a lot of time working and like mixing the stuff. And then by the time I was getting close to finishing it, I deconverted.
Oh,
so
man.
I have like this whole like giant folder of files and vocals.
You should release it under a pseudonym, like go by a different name, and no one would know.
No, like I haven't even, I kid you not, I haven't listened to that stuff probably since I recorded it, actually. And that was like in 2010, maybe 2011. It's just sitting there, like, I don't know. Hopefully it'll never get leaked
That's
if I
really
actually, you know, if I get any sort of notoriety, they'll be like, hey, this is like what he used to do. It's like, just really corny stuff. I mean, corny to me now because, my perspective is different, but
yeah.
a lot of those tracks are the stuff that I have on my site, like the instrumental versions of it. Like, there's no
Oh,
vocals
cool.
on anything. I don't really know how to describe it. Like, if you've ever listened to like hip hop that is instrumental, is kind of like that. It's like something that people would not like expect to be rhythmic or even progressive or alternative. Like, let's take a Josh Groban song and then add like aggressive drums and like all these other elements to it, and then people would be like, oh man, this is hot. It's like, yeah, it's Josh Groban. Like, what? Like, I'd never listened to that, but it's just kind of like that, just an experiment, and people like it.
That's cool. How long have
So
you had the blog up?
that site, it's just Bandcamp. It's an artist site, so you can upload your stuff to it. The blog is another story. I've always been a person who like shares music with people. So like when like cassettes were the thing, I would make like mixtapes and then like give them to like people in my class at school or people at church, that were my friends, or, just whoever. Like, I've given out so many different mixtapes, burnt CDs. Now with the whole streaming and like being able to make playlists and like put them in different places and stuff like that, it's so much easier to do that.
Oh my
Like, I
gosh.
can be that same nerd, but I don't have to like go to Walmart and buy like blank cassettes and then like write on the labels and like I really did all this stuff. Friends of mine who weren't near me, like I would mail that shit to them. Like it's pretty crazy. I had a friend, he's probably the only friend that's in my age group that I consider that still kind of hung on from like my previous, Christian
Yeah.
days. That's my age. He likes music, but he doesn't really seek out a lot of stuff. So like he was one of my roommates in college. So he'd always be playing like the same kind of stuff. He'd be listening to the Beatles, Muse, the Strokes, like all your typical college white guy. It's just like, okay, like whatever. But I was like, man, you need to hear like some different stuff, man. So like I was trying to get him to listen to different things. But yeah, I started the blog, or actually the blog was really kind of his idea. I just made playlist for him. It was like, hey, these are my favorite songs of the year. Listen to it's kind of like a challenge before there was the little like challenges things. You have to listen to the whole thing. You can't skip anything. You gotta listen to the whole thing at least once. And you gotta tell me what you think, just kind of react to it. And it was like the first couple times it wasn't like a blog, or it was me just sharing it with him and then us talking about it. And then he's a writer, like he's an English major. So he writes poetry, he writes short stories, it's just a thing that he does. So the third year that I did it, he started writing a blog about every single song, So I was like, wow, you've really run up to me. I guess now I have to write a blog. That was kind of when I started it. So I guess the blog is technically about like maybe 3 years old.
But you've been doing the music stuff a little longer than that. On the blog, yeah. Like you've been posting it.
Yeah. So like I do it every year. I've been trying to figure out a way to add more content to the blog, because now that I've been doing it, people are used to it, so they'll like really comment, or they'll be like, hey, I'm behind, like catch me up or whatever. So it's kind of like a cool little thing, at least within my own little Facebook circle.
Yeah, it's kind of fun when you can kind of create a community around something that you love.
Yeah.
Well, you said that you consider yourself an atheist. Is that the term that you prefer?
I think so. I think the other terms, in my opinion, in my perspective, are just kind of like softened versions of that. Yeah. I can say I'm agnostic, and it might make me appeal more friendly to certain Christians.
Right.
Like they can swallow that a little bit better. True. Or I'm a humanist. a lot of people don't really know what a humanist is. Like, what is that? Like, they might even think, oh, like, are you a Satanist? And a lot of people don't know what that actually means.
Yeah.
It's just, atheist is pretty
Mm-hmm.
simple, because you can't prove that God doesn't exist. So, like, nobody, unless somebody can,
Mm-hmm.
unless somebody's made the case for that, so it's like kind of redundant to say, like, oh, well, if they're, to go that far, like, oh, well, I have to, like, explain this much just so you can feel okay with
Right.
me as a person. It's just like, no, I don't believe in, in my case, the Christian
Mm-hmm.
God, and you don't believe in all the many other gods that were
Yeah.
imagined.
Yeah. Yeah, it cuts to the chase a little bit quicker, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, in what ways was Christianity a part of your childhood and how did it influence you?
Christianity was a pretty big part of my life. My mom was born and raised Seventh Day Adventist. I want to say since the age of 4. It was just her life. That was, her worldview. She accepted it. She never left it. It, you know, drove a lot of her life goals. She wanted to get married. She wanted to have kids. She wanted to have a strong Christian family. She wanted to work in the church. That was what she wanted in life.
Yeah.
It wasn't, like, oh, I got this plan to be whatever this thing is and get these degrees and, like
Yeah.
everyone has different ambitions in life, and this was hers. So I think her determination to make that happen had a strong impact on how I received Christianity and how I understood just the things that are being presented to me. I think that that's probably the biggest thing. Like, if you have, I just had a couple roommates move out, so I don't know if this is exactly true, but up until at least this month, I've been living with 3 other Adventists.
Oh, wow. Former or current?
Current, I think they would definitely identify
Oh,
as
how funny.
Adventists, but they're like not really, not really about that
Yeah.
life. you know,
It's like the roots, but they
I
don't
mean,
really, maybe nominally Seventh day Adventists. Like they would call themselves that, but they don't really, do they like not go to church regularly or that kind of thing? Is that what you mean?
they go to church if they want
Yeah.
to, if something's going on, if there's an event. A lot of times, sometimes I have to work on Saturday and I'll leave the house and I'm the only person who's left the house and it's like noon, so it's just like, they just kind of, they live their lives, I don't ever really hear them talk about God or, the end times or, just like any of these things that are very central to the belief system. It's just like they probably wouldn't bring anything up unless, they were confronted on like creation or the
Yeah.
origin of life or things like that. It's just like, hey, I have an explanation for this. Here is the explanation. Or I had a conversation with one of them about, I think it was getting flu shots. And, it's like, oh, do flu shots cause, or vaccines cause, you know, different, health defects or like whatever. And, he was just kind of like, well, if we would live like God told us to live and like eat, God's original diet and like all this, that, and the third. But I'm thinking about him, like I just watched him a couple hours ago make a bologna sandwich with, ketchup and, drink a Mountain Dew and, like I was just thinking like, like, okay, but it's like, it's good. When you have been presented with all this information, it becomes good for the ego to like be able to spout it out to people who don't know, whether you live it or not. It's just like you get this. I don't know if it's endorphins
Yeah.
or whatever it is, but it's just like it
Like you
feels
belong to
good.
something,
Like,
you have
yeah,
the answers to these
right,
questions, you've thought it
right,
through. Gives people a sense of comfort, I think,
yeah,
probably. Well,
yeah,
when you were growing up, you were homeschooled, and I heard you say most of your childhood. Yeah,
yeah.
what was that like, and how was Christianity kind of infused into that lifestyle?
As far as my grade school education, I had a lot of homeschool. I think maybe 3 of the years might have been like, actually, no, it's probably more than that. Maybe like 4 or 5 of the years were like church schools, some Adventist, some just Christian. 2 years of public school. One was like a middle class, nice neighborhood kind of area, public school. There were definitely some differences, but I was pretty young at that point. I think I was like 9. So I wasn't really thinking about that. It just didn't seem that different from like other things I experienced in like nice church schools.
And was it because, like at that time, for some reason, your mom wasn't able to do the homeschooling, so you would go to public school for like a year? Is that kind of what was happening, or?
Well, the first time, and that was like 4th grade, I think it was just because it was a really nice school. It was in our district or whatever. And, my mom looked at it and she didn't, she felt like it would be okay.
That's interesting because she's so devout and she was so committed to the faith and to homeschooling, it sounds like. But then she found a school that she liked and she was open to that, a secular school.
I mean, at least I'm kind of guessing on that. I don't know that 100%.
That's all right. You're speculating, yeah.
It was just, right, it's just kind of like, okay, I was homeschooled the year before, and now we moved, and now I'm going to this school. Okay, cool. Like, yeah. That's just my attitude about it. 6th grade, this was right around the time when my parents were kind of getting close to divorce time. We went to this kind of, it was predominantly black, in a not so great area, not super funded well, and they got by, but I mean, I remember being like the best in my class at math.
Wow.
And I wasn't doing good. I was making like C's.
Wow.
I've never been good at math. So, and I I remember being teased about that, and like I used to read
like,
a lot.
Because you were like the smart kid. They were like teasing you because you were getting C.
Yeah. In math, and everything else, I was doing way better than that. But like I've always been bad at math.
That's funny though, yeah.
But I would read a ton, and they wouldn't want to read, and just so it was a culture shock on so many different levels. Like we would ride the bus to school, and we would hear like secular music and like rap and R&B and like stuff like that. And it was just a culture shock for me at that time. But there was a lot of other things going on too. Like, kids were like getting in fights on the buses and getting kicked off or whatever. So I was just like, I'm just going to do my work. I'm just going to kind of stay in my little bubble. And I think I only had like 3 friends the whole year.
You're just trying to keep your head down and do your work and stay out of trouble. And
right. Because I was already a shy kid. But being put in that, and I think my dad is the one who kind of enrolled us in there just to kind of spite my mom at that time, and that's how we kind of got stuck in it. It's kind of rough, and this probably speaks to just the determination my mom had and her integrity in raising her kids. I don't feel like it changed me. I feel like I still had the same principles coming out of that. I mean, yeah, there were some things that might have influenced me, like even the fact that I heard secular music at the time, which now, if I hear music from that time period, and that was 2000 to 01, so whatever was popping at that time, when I hear that stuff now, it'll remind me of that.
Interesting.
Of that school year. Because I mean, prior to that, I was completely oblivious to any secular music up until that point. And even after that, I didn't listen to secular music for another 4 or 5 years.
So you didn't listen to secular music for 4 or 5 years after going to that public school?
After going to that school, yeah. I didn't listen to secular music till I was 15.
Okay.
That was my sister's fault. She started when the last Christian school we went to before I was homeschooled all through high school. She started bringing little blank CDs home, bring home Eminem or Justin Timberlake or Maroon 5 or whatever. So I was just you're not supposed to be listening to that or whatever. She'd be like, leave me alone. And I would always be kind of like goading her about that. Like, ooh, what are you listening to? Why do you gotta have your headphones on?
You're the little
that.
you're the little brother, right?
Yeah, she's not quite 3 years older than me, but
Yeah, well, I'm
pretty
I'm I'm a
close.
middle child, so that's our role as little brother is to bug our older sisters. So
Yeah. Well, I think she bugged me a lot more than I bugged her. Like,
it's the siblings, in general. But yeah. Well, what other ways was Christianity a part of your childhood? Is there anything that you remember about that time in your life in relation to how you felt about the church or about God?
I really just accepted everything. Like, I'm not a rebellious person. I don't think I
Hmm.
ever have been. So, when my mom used to teach me about God and, you know, she gave me like my first Bible and, you know, I got in the habit of reading it every day or reading it pretty often.
Hmm.
There were time periods where I would like wake up, I can think of being like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, getting up at like 4 or 5 in the morning,
Wow.
open up my Bible. Well, no, praying first. You got to pray first. You're not supposed to just open the Bible and like not ask for like the spirit of understanding and
Oh,
like
wow.
all that. So, you pray first and then read the Bible. So, I do that for a couple hours, especially like when I was trying to really get serious and you do it before school and like all of that. So, I'd start my days with that and, just it was just very much a part of my life.
Yeah.
And, it's what I was taught. And I would get lazy sometimes, just, not do it. Just wake up and get up and go and, you know,
And this is a habit that you created of your own kind of motivation, or was your mom saying to you, like, hey, this is,
she never told me specifically to do that, but it would just be like, I felt like, okay, well, based on what I was taught, if Jesus had to like fast and like whatever for 40 days and like whatever, or however long it was, I
right.
might have like totally screwed that up, but
No, I think that's right. He was like in the desert for 40 days or something like that. Yeah.
you being the lowly sinful human that you are, you think you can just go off of like 5 minutes of devotional or a quick prayer and like no devotional and just a quick prayer before you hop on the bus or before you start your schoolwork or so I tried to take that to heart and I read through the Bible at least once, like all the way through
Wow.
straight, and it was hard. It's hard to
Yeah.
read.
At what age
Uh,
did you do that?
oh, that was later though. That was
Oh,
like 16. It was before I went to college,
that's still, I mean,
and it was like I was like, okay, I'm gonna read through and I'm gonna underline all the parts that are like important to me, and you know.
that's when you discover that there's like lists of like names that go on for like 2 pages.
Well, I started with the New Testament. I started with the New Testament,
That's probably good.
and that was a fairly easy read.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the Old Testament, I mean, well, depending on what version you have, let me say that.
True. True.
But the Old Testament was so hard to read.
Oh yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
hard. Just because it's so boring, it's not interesting. And there's a lot of weird things happening. Like, like what is this? This doesn't really make sense. But you're not reading it like that. You're reading it. My purpose in reading that was to actually be like, I haven't actually read the whole Bible, so let me read the whole Bible.
Right.
And even though I was later told by a pastor's wife that that's not how you read the Bible. You can't read the Bible like a novel. You gotta like look at the context. You gotta like, so there's like all these different things that you have to do to get like the real meaning of what God is trying to say to you in this passage or in this book. You can't just read it and then expect to have, gotten everything.
It's so funny. It's like as a Christian, you should read your Bible, right? And then you're reading your Bible, and Christians are going like, you're not reading it right.
Well, I think even like having those kind of approaches, that's why it was encouraged a lot, like, oh, you
Yeah.
need to be reading your Bible all the time, or you should be going through your Bible every year, the different like calendar plans and like stuff like that, read X amount of verses per
Hmm.
month or per week or whatever. And I never really did it like that. I was just like, okay, let's just knock it out. It's just, I don't remember how long it took me. I just did it.
Yeah. What about this, like waking up the waking up at 4 a.m. and praying?
That was preteen.
That's some amazing dedication as like a preteen to be getting up at 4 a.m. to do a prayer.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you were devoted. I mean, that takes some dedication. Yeah.
I mean, I don't ever wake up at 4 a.m. now.
I know, you're like, what was I thinking?
Well, no, I think it was just the timing of like what was going on then. I think I specifically remember that time period being a time when I was being homeschooled, but my mom was working. So she would go to work at a certain time, and that would prompt me to be up.
Oh, okay.
Just because maybe she would want me to help her make her lunch, or go get her something while she's getting ready, or whatever. So
Yeah.
a lot of the times, even if I just got up real quick and told her bye or whatever, it would prompt me to be up kind of early-ish. So even if it wasn't like quite 4, it might be like 5 or 6,
Yeah.
or
It was just kind of built into your routine. It sounds like it was just part of the routine of that time in your life.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I went through some periods I was doing that, and some periods I wasn't doing that at all. It's just, different things going on. I'm not going to say like, oh, it's super, like I did everything super perfect. I mean, like nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
But,
But yeah, that's interesting. But so what did God mean to you personally as you grew older or as a child? What was your, a lot of times real conservative Christians will talk about having a personal relationship with God. Did you view it that way?
Yeah, I definitely did. Absolutely. Because that's how it was presented to me. Like it wasn't just a thing. We go to church and we do this stuff and we have this 24-hour Sabbath period where we can't do this and we can't do that. It was all about the relationship, and it was all about pleasing God, getting to know God better, learning what his will is for our lives and trying to follow that, and denying self, huge thing,
What were some ways as a kid that you denied self?
I probably didn't get a better grasp on that until like later.
Okay.
I mean, even though I'm sure there were times that I did, but like it wasn't like a real conscious thing. Like it was hammered into me a lot, like, the doctrine of just kind of like, self, anything, there's no good in you of your own, so like your will is, trash, it's worthless, your righteousness like filthy rags, so anytime you want to make a decision, you need to find out what you can't even say like, oh, I'm going to do this. It has to be, well, if it's the Lord's will, or, what does the Lord want me to do? Everything you do, whether you're sweeping the floor, whether you're trying to witness to somebody or whatever, you have to do to the glory of God, because he's expecting you to represent him in everything you do. It's just like everything. There was like a lot of reasoning behind a lot of the things that my mom explained. Like she wouldn't just be like, oh, you have to do this because this is what we do. She really tried to explain it. I was just like, okay, I didn't have any reason in those days to like question it or doubt it, or like I said, I'm not a rebellious person, and I know my mom loves me and cares about me, so I just kind of
trust what she's telling you. Yeah,
right. And it wasn't
sense.
Like it was legit. Like I really, I accepted it and I believed it, and I would pray to God, and I tried to see God as my friend.
Yeah. After
my parents divorced, my mom would often say to me, God's your father. He's your real father, So like, your earthly father, he doesn't want to be involved, or he doesn't care. He's full of sin or like whatever, but don't worry about him, or don't feel like, like, oh, I don't have a father, because, you have your heavenly father.
Did your dad eventually move away? Is that like he wasn't around as much, and that's why she was saying that?
The history of my dad and my family, he was essentially, or at least as far as my existence goes, like I can't really speak to like what happened before I was conscious, but he was there but not there. He was just kind of like this. Is he here? Yeah, he's here. He's upstairs sleeping. Or like, yeah, he's doing something on the computer. Or he's,
He'd be around. Like, he's around sometimes.
Right, and maybe sometimes you see him. We never had any conversations. We never did anything together.
Wow.
There were a couple of times close to the end where he tried to do a couple of things a little bit, but he just didn't really, he didn't really seem to know what he was doing, or, I didn't really know what was going on in his head. But, I mean, basically, that's my experience with my dad up until divorce. And then after he divorced, now he's not physically there, and now his military medical money is not paying for things.
Oh.
So that changed some dynamics of things, like my mom was working more and, and she worked hard to make sure that we still had the things we needed and wanted, and that we didn't miss a beat. And she wanted to make sure that that wasn't an issue. So she did a lot of things. And I mean, like, she was homeschooling us, and she's also working. And,
wow.
The first year, like my first year of high school, she actually wasn't working there in that time.
She was doing a ton of stuff on her own.
She did a lot of stuff, that means a lot to me. And, I really respect that, even though now I'm not a believer anymore. But
yeah, but some of those values.
I feel like, I learned a lot from my mom. I learned a lot of things that help me now, and that are just a part of who I am, that I don't think would have been otherwise if I had a different parent.
How old were you when your parents divorced then?
So he left the house maybe like about a year-ish before they actually divorced. So when he left, I was like 11, and when they divorced, I was about 12.
And because he wasn't a huge part of your life even when he was around, was the loss of not having him around, or the effect of not having him around, did that impact you significantly, do you think, or not so much because you were kind of used to him not being around?
Well, here's the thing with that. And this sounds like super not good, but just like him as a person, like not his role as a father, that he has had this space to occupy. Just him as a person, like, it's just kind of like never really meant much to me. He's never really, I used to think I was mad at him, but then I realized, well, I'm not really mad at him because there's nothing there. Like, there's nothing to be mad at. Like, when I think of him, I have absolutely no emotion.
Yeah.
And there's just, like, I feel nothing. It still changed the dynamics of things to where I ultimately realized, and it took me a year or two to really kind of realize, like, hey, I don't have a father. Or, like, even like, I accepted so much of my childhood as just like, okay, this is how it is. This is like, I literally, when I was probably like 8 or 7, I thought that everyone was Adventist. That's the world. Everyone is Adventist. Vegetarianism is kind of like a thing for Adventists. I don't know how much it is now. Definitely when I was growing up, it was kind of like a given. Now, I think it's kind of been a little bit, like,
watered down.
Yeah, it's a little bit more watered down. Even the last church that we attended, it was so interesting because, like, we would go to people's houses and they'd be serving meat. They'd all be serving meat. And so, like, to the point where, like, if we were going to people's houses, my mom would bring food so we would have something to eat. All the kids there were, like, I felt like I was the only one who wasn't listening to secular music. Or even, like, I think at that point I had started listening to a little bit. Like, I might, like, listen to, like, maybe, like, a little bit of Coldplay or a little bit of Mary J. Blige, or, like, just some stuff that's, like, kind of, like, safe but not, like, too extreme, or, like, It's like, and I can't listen to all their songs, just listen to like these specific
Yeah.
songs. But
That's funny.
they're like, oh, you still listen to like this or like whatever. Like I was just like, what, y'all don't listen to this? Like y'all are in here at church with me, like I don't get it. I don't know. At that point, I kind of realized that it was just different. And when I got to college, I just realized like, well, like the world is way different. The Adventist world even is just
Wow.
way different than I thought it was. But
Mm-hmm.
as a kid, like I was just super like, I thought that this is the world, like
Mm-hmm.
not just the world view, but like this is it. Like I even remember like riding in the car and there's a whining song playing on the radio, and one of the lyrics was like every day will be Sunday, and I'm like every day will be Sunday. Why is he saying that, Mom? Like he knows every day will be Saturday.
Yeah,
you know.
because for people who are listening who may not know, Seventh Day Adventist, Saturday's the Sabbath, right?
Yeah, the seventh day
Yeah.
is the Sabbath, according to the fourth commandment. And it's one of those things that if you just look at that, their doctrine on that, and, they do the research, oh, the Catholic Church changed it, and you look at what the Catholic Church has actually said about that, they're like, yeah, and, like, yeah, we did that. We did that.
But that's
So.
yeah. So as you grew, you were starting to realize like, oh, this isn't the full picture here. Like, there's people out there who have different views on things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, after your parents' divorce, your mom was emphasizing how God's your heavenly Father. He's your real Father. In general, did your faith deepen from that point on, or change in any way?
I mean, I had highs and lows like probably most Christians do. Like I was serious about it, and I was, or at least I felt like I was serious. I'm sure I could talk to my mom. She'd be like, oh, you weren't all that serious, like whatever. But like I really believed it is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I don't know that necessarily made it more. I felt like my mom was trying to encourage me. I still, especially the older I got, I kind of felt like, I should have a father. Like, this isn't how, like, I literally used to think, just like along with me accepting everything else, like, okay, well, the mother does, the cooking, the cleaning, she plays with you, she
Wow.
shows you how to do this, shows you how to do that, and the dad just goes and works and makes the money, and, then he goes to sleep, or when he's not at work, or, he just does whatever he wants to
Yeah.
do, he doesn't have to, like, you know but I mean, and that was not like a conscious thing I was thinking, but it was just kind of like, oh, okay, well, I guess that's how it is, that's how this family thing goes,
Yeah.
right? Like, because that's what was happening.
Right.
Maybe even some of that behavior might have been modeled or mirrored off of that, because I can think of a lot of times, my mom would be frustrated or sad, and she would say, like, you don't love me, like no one in here loves me, and like I'm doing all these things for them or whatever. And I didn't feel like that. I didn't feel like I didn't love her, or that like
Right.
I was, and even like after the divorce, I would still hear her say that, and I would just be like, it kind of made me feel for a while that's like I really have to prove to her that I love her,
Mm.
because she feels like I don't. She feels like I'm just like my dad, or that I don't care, I'm selfish or whatever. It took a while for me to kind of like process through that and like kind of realize what was actually going on, because I can see some things that probably weren't the best, coming
Yeah.
from me, being younger. But this is the environment that I was in. This is the model that I have in front of me.
You mean you weren't behaving the best? Is that what you mean?
I think there were times when I could have been more considerate. There were times when I could have helped out more. I mean, I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't a bad kid at all. But
Yeah.
I just,
But you were a kid.
I can see what might have triggered her saying that. Especially between me and my sister. My sister has been more rebellious and more outspoken, and just a lot more of the things that I'm not. She's went there. My dad and the whole like father or God thing, I don't know that that necessarily helped. I don't know if it helped or hurt.
Yeah.
Maybe it hurt. Maybe it did damage, actually, because by the time I was 14, I was starting to have friends that I would play with. This is post-divorce friends, So, like, I mean, I had friends before. I didn't go. There weren't a whole lot of sleepover unless they were at our house. My mom was like, really protective. She didn't like, I don't want you going over there, and anything could happen. I don't know who's over there. Like I can't like control the situation. So it's like, nah, not especially when we were like young, single-digit age.
Yeah.
Early teens. Like if we were gonna have a party or sleepover, we were having it at our house. But by the time I was getting like 14, 15, I would be sleeping over at different friends' house or be hanging out or whatever, and I would see their parents and their dads, like play with them and like hang out with them, and it's just like, oh, wait a minute, like that's what it's supposed to be like, that's what a dad does. So at that point, that's when it kind of clicked for me. It's like, wait a minute, not only do I not have that, but I've never had that, whether he was here or not. My family is super small. Like I have my mom and my sister and my grandmother, who's actually about to turn 90 next month. Yeah, she's up there. And that's it. Like, I mean, yeah, there are other blood relatives and stuff, but for whatever reason, we're just not connected, and we never really have been. There's people on my mom's side that she knows maybe a little bit more than I do, and there's a couple names I can pick out. There's one cousin that actually lived with us for like a period of time when we were in Hawaii. Moderately in touch now, but it's like, it's just like this is my family unit. I kind of feel, and there can be a lot of issues within that I probably won't go into detail on.
That's fine.
But yeah, I mean, it's super small, but I didn't really get to meet my granddad. There's no uncles. There's no kind of.
It was just you and your mom and your sister, pretty much.
That's what it was.
So, what else is significant about this time in your life up to this point?
Okay, so the thing about like me realizing like, okay, hey, I don't really have a dad, and also watching my mom go through the stress that she went through, the things that she had to do in order to like make this family work and like kind of like support us, and there are times where it emotionally took its toll, and I would be watching her crying, and she would be asking God for help, and just really agonizing with him, and it was just like some pretty like super emotional stuff. And I think she wonders about this too. I don't know if she's ever gonna listen to this, but she's gonna be like, I was right. Yeah, I never should have said those things. That's those are the times that I'm not proud of, and I shouldn't have said those things, because now it planted seeds of doubt in your mind. But she would kind of question God a little bit, and she would like really because she's there trying to doing the right things, trying to live right, not throwing God away, or not like slacking off on that area. So it's just like, hey, like I'm trying to do the best I can, I need your help. And it's just kind of like the general response.
I mean, that's stressful for a kid to have to bear that burden. Like you see your mom struggling and you want to help, but there's only so much you can do as a kid.
So I mean, and I don't know if that had any influence. I mean, maybe it did. I guess it did. Because, around that time, I would just start to think a little bit about, where is God? Like, what are you doing? Like, what's happening in the grand scheme of things, Because I don't see any, like, major miracles or like major like
Right. Like, where is he?
yeah, like what's happening. Those are hard. You chalk that up to those are just hard times, and we got through them or whatever.
Yeah.
Still kind of doing my thing, being a teenager or whatever.
So can you identify a time when you began to doubt your beliefs? You're going along, the divorce happens, you're still, doing what you should, you're a good Christian, and your mom's doing everything she can. You guys are kind of struggling on some levels, but you guys are staying together and sticking together and stuff. So
Yeah.
when do things start to change for you? When do those doubts start to creep in, or when do they start to become more significant?
It wasn't until after I went to college, which I went to Southern Adventist University in Collegedale, Tennessee. Okay. It wasn't like a culture shock like how like the 6th grade public school was, but it was definitely eye-opening because I met all different kinds of people. You had your ultra conservative Adventist, who like did like all the right things, and they're trying to go on mission trips, and they're trying to start Bible studies, and like they're doing their thing. They're super duper Adventist thing. And
super duper.
I was friends with a lot of them, especially since I was a theology major. So, I was in touch with a lot of those people, connected with those people. And then I also met people who were just kind of in the middle, just kind of like, whatever, I'm just here because my parents are paying for it. Some of them weren't Adventist at all, but they were just here because their parents wanted them to go. They wanted them not to get in trouble and go to like the crazy colleges or, the community colleges. Okay, I'm going to bring up Ellen White, and I don't know if you know anything about her.
Oh my God, I should. That name sounds familiar. Anyway, you tell me.
Okay, well, yeah, Ellen
clearly
White.
I don't remember.
Ellen White is kind of like essentially, and again, like any Adventist person that's known me that hears this is going to hate me for saying this, but she's like the Joseph Smith of Adventism, basically. She's the prophet, or she's referred to as like the spirit of prophecy, or like Sister White, like all these kind of terms. It's just like she's kind of like the supplement to the Bible. She doesn't contradict the Bible, but she has predicted things that have come to pass. So because she kind of has like the God stamp of approval, like everything she says is automatically true, and like this is also, don't throw out the Bible and just have her, but this is like behind the scenes info on like everything, it's like it fills in all the blanks that you thought the Bible left out, she's got you.
Yeah.
So some people didn't believe in her.
Oh,
essentially.
Interesting.
And my thing, especially now, at the time it was just kind of like, oh, well, that's not how I was raised to think. Like now, I'm like, if someone says that to me, oh, I don't really believe her, I don't really follow her stuff, I'm like, well, one, she and her husband or whatever, they were definitely part of founding Adventism, and her visions and stuff and like all that surrounded that has a lot to do with the theology, with the teachings. Like there's a lot of stuff that comes from her that Adventists just like, like if it hasn't been broken down to you, if you don't know where the source is, you're just gonna be like, oh, why is this a thing that Adventists do? Because I don't remember reading this in the Bible. Oh, it's an Ellen White thing. And like a lot of kind of more modern, but not things that like the Bible wouldn't reference, like going to movies is a sin. You go into the theater and your angels will leave you at the door, and because they can't go in there, all the sin and things that are taking place in the theater, all different kinds of things.
So you were starting to get exposed to people who didn't totally like hold to those beliefs as strictly as maybe you did, and right. So I'm like, oh, there are people who are still Adventists, but they're not doing. And like for me, it was just the idea of that being presented to me. I never felt like I could do that. Like I never felt like that was an option.
Right? How can I not? Or the Sabbath, you're not supposed to buy and sell on the Sabbath. You're supposed to prepare your food ahead of time. There's a lot of specific things about it. And a lot of people, they would go to church, maybe, and then they'll just do whatever. Maybe they go to Taco Bell afterwards, or maybe they'd like to, play games or like whatever.
Yeah.
And, basically like, other denominations, they go to church and then the rest of the day is like a normal day. Like
Yeah.
they don't, for me, that was just like, oh, like that's not good, or I can't do that. And I even had a little beef with the cafeteria at the school because they served food on Saturday, like kind of like after the church time. They would still charge people for it. I mean, as far as I know, they still do that. But I mean, I haven't been there since 2010.
Yeah.
But they never changed it while I was there. But I was just like, it was like
so they're buying and selling on the Sabbath.
Yeah. But it was like my on-campus job. It was like how I'd make a little bit of change while I was in school. And they would want me to work on Sabbath. And I would be like, I didn't really want to do it. And then when I found out that they're like, oh, like we're expecting payment when you come up and slide through the line with your food. They have like a student card where you have like a meal plan. So either doing that or they'll take your credit, your debit, like your cash, whatever.
So funny. It's like the practical stuff. Like, like there's in theory, these doctrines, people can adhere to them. But then in practice here at the cafeteria, like they've got to make money. They got to sell the food. They got to, so here they're doing this. So this is the kind of thing that's going through your mind. Like, oh, this is kind of contradicting, our beliefs, but I guess it's okay because they're doing it. Or
so here's the thing, like I got to a point where I would just like straight skip my Saturdays, and it got to a point where they're like, if you skip one more Saturday, you can't work in the cafeteria again. And I went to the director of the student services or whatever, because I kind of knew him a little bit just from seeing him around. So I went to his office one day and I was like, hey, what's this business about you guys taking money for food on the Sabbath, which is the very thing that, they probably just walked out of the Collegeville church, somebody telling them not to do such things, and they can just walk right up the street on this campus and do just that. So he was like, well, we've tried to figure out a solution for this because, the students are here and we've had them complain and the parents complain about them not having food, during this time period. I'm like, so how come they can't do like every other Adventist and get their food ahead of time? You have 6 whole days to figure out what you're going to eat on one day, but and
everyone else can do it, but they can't for some reason.
Exactly. So he was just like, well, that's just kind of like what we... So I was like, yeah, okay, all right.
Where did your doubts go from there? So that was kind of the beginning of it, or that was part of what was going on at that time in your life. But what other doubts were creeping in, or what other issues were going on that made you start to question?
Something a little bit more specifically that kind of like connected to some doubts, which I was taking my religion classes because I was a theology major. And I changed my major a lot, but it was all religion stuff. It was like religious education, pastoral care. Like, I didn't really want to do any of it. I did want to go to the school, and, my mom was kind of pushing me to go in that direction at first. I was like an English major for one semester because I like writing. And then I was like, I don't want to read all these little classics, like, what does this have to do with anything?
Mm-hmm. That's funny.
So, I took one of my religion classes, and it was called Adventist Heritage. And this guy, super nice guy, and he remembered me for a long time. Like, I saw him like maybe 2 years after I left Southern, and he knew my name. He's just like, he greeted me and everything. I don't know if he would still know me now. It's been a while, but super nice guy, really short, really energetic. And he was like the Ellen White stan. Like, he loves some Ellen White, man. And he was actually in the process of writing a book defending her from like people who were criticizing her, like, oh, she's plagiarized other authors, she's predicted things that haven't come true or things that are false. So his thing was like, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm going to show you guys the things that they're saying about her and where they're saying them at.
Oh,
You know,
interesting.
so he put up some of the websites and some of the things that they were saying and whatever. And his thing was like he was trying to combat that or counter that.
Yeah.
And so me and like some of my friends are in that class, like after seeing that, of course, let's check this out. Let's see what she's saying.
Yeah.
And, there's some pretty crazy shit. And they're just looking at us like, wow, she said this, or like she really like just like stole these paragraphs word for word, or like, like it was just like, man, I'm not rocking with that. And like for me, I was just like, well, I was looking at it, I was like, this doesn't look too good, but I can't, that's just, that's the devil, that's Satan, he's trying to get me to not believe. He's trying to, like, of course, like this is wrong. I'm going to keep believing everything that I've been taught to believe because that's what I'm supposed to believe, and that's true. So, and that was kind of my response to it then, but details, those little nitpicks just don't really matter to me anymore.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I remember it being like an issue, but like now that I think about it, I'm just like, I can't remember what they are right now. So I can't speak to it in this moment.
I've had a similar experience where all that theology was always on my mind and debating different pieces of theology. You know what I mean? Like all that was always there. And then when you deconvert, it doesn't matter. So you're kind of like, I don't really care if someone's predestined or not predestined. I don't believe any of it,
Yeah. So it was just kind of like that kind of like started a thing of like, well, I've never looked outside of, even when I told my mom that I was atheist, I was leaving the church anymore. She's just like, oh, it's like this sudden thing. Like you just suddenly, I was like, well, no, it's not like, or, you must have been, you're listening to these people and they're deceiving you. I'm just like, just like anything else, you can just look at it from a different angle or maybe like from a different perception. Like I was, she was teaching me all through up to 18. Then when I went to the college, they were pretty much reinforcing the same things I already knew.
Right.
Like even though I was studying theology, there wasn't a whole lot of perspective of other religions, even though they did have a class called World Religions, but it was like one of the upper level classes. Like you wouldn't get to take it until you were like a junior or senior.
Like they're keeping you sheltered from it until the very last minute,
Yeah.
Until they've really indoctrinated you really well.
Yeah. But I mean, the people who I know have took that, they're like, it wasn't that extensive anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but I was still
hanging on.
I was still hanging on because my thing was never like super about theology or even about the church. Like I never really felt accepted at church, not 100%. And that could have just been because of me. I was a shy, awkward kid. I had a lot to learn as far as social skills, especially during that era of my life, like the 1 to 18.
It's awkward for kids anyway, right?
Yeah.
And then you add on to it all the moving you were doing and being homeschooled and
yeah, absolutely. So I started, the thing that affected me, the personal relationship thing, trying to find reality in that, trying to find anything, asking it should be given to you. Like very simple statements. It's like, okay, that sounds very simple, like, let me try that. And then you get nothing, not what you asked for, not something else, but just like, like nothing specific that I can say that is like, okay, well, this is a direct answer to that, or God's trying to communicate this to me. It's just kind of like, well, I keep going and then something else happens. It's like, well, I guess this is what God means, or this is what he wants me to do, or whatever. And that kind of frustrated me because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. By the time I went to college, like I'm surrounded by all this religion stuff and I like to write and I'm kind of into music. I kind of like have like one foot in like a bunch of different things. I'm still trying to find myself. I was just kind of following what I was taught, like you got, you can't be like thinking about what are your desires and what do you want. And, what are your dreams? You gotta it's all about God. It's all about what you can do for God and what you can do for others. So what you can do for yourself doesn't necessarily matter so much.
Yeah, so that's why you're looking for God's will, and that's why
Exactly.
you're trying like to test this promise that he has, like ask and it will be given. You're like, okay, it's not about me. I want to know what you want, God. So you're pursuing
Right.
that.
Right. And my thing was like, if you won't tell me until like I get to a certain level, like what do I need? Is there something I need to do? So I would like fast. I went for like long walks around. Like it's a really nice campus, but it has a lot of different like nature trails and stuff. So I would go on those nature trails, like take my Bible with me. I would do like the, the thing where you just randomly open the Bible and like wherever it falls, that's where God's gonna speak to me today, because it's just kind of like a magic 8-ball thing.
Right, it's true. A lot of us did that.
And I remember there's one time I fell on Isaiah, and there's some pretty harsh stuff in Isaiah, just about humanity and sinful humans and what you've done. God talking to whoever he was talking to. Like
Right.
Specifics I can't speak to just because it's been a while since I've gotten into it, and I don't want to like totally screw it up. So yeah, and I just agonized and I cried, and I think I remember like at the end of that day or whatever, I think it was the Sabbath period, and I felt a little bit better, I guess. Like those would kind of be like the moments that I kind of consider like, oh, okay, like I'm talking to God and he's I guess making me feel something. Like I'm not actually hearing anything, I'm not coming away from that and like suddenly I know what it is. I instinctively know the thing that God wants me to do and how he wants me to go about doing it. And, now I just have to discipline myself and take the calling that he's given me. I kind of thought that that's how it was going to be, but instead I just kind of got nothing.
So during those like nature walks and when you had your Bible, you would feel better when you were done, but you didn't come away with anything specific.
I wouldn't always feel better. That time I felt better.
Okay.
Sometimes I would be struggling through with it, or maybe I would come across one of those verses that's like kind of harsh. It's just like, yeah, like you've done all these things and and I just feel awful. So I feel like unworthy, and kind of have like that, that kind of cycle of thinking. Right, like I never came away with like, well, God really spoke to me, or like these. Yeah, I talk to a lot of Christian friends and they tell me these God stories, and about 80% of them are the story where, you hear a voice that tells you to do something and you do it, and it has this domino effect of great things happening, or things that, oh, I can't believe this happened, or I met this person, then whatever, I led them to Christ, or like this thing happened. It's like, well, it's crazy. And none of it would have happened if I hadn't heard the still small voice of the Lord, telling me to like, directing me to do this thing. And some people like really like, when it comes down, like if you ask them about their faith, they got the doctrine or whatever. But honestly, all of that stuff kind of is what it is. But as far as like the personal relationship thing, people have to go to these kind of moments where like, well, I remember that time when there was this thing and it felt so real to me, and that was like God doing his thing. And
that's their proof.
It's their proof because it's the most real. Like, you can believe the Bible and stuff, but at the end of the day, like the thing that I'm saying that I didn't get, people are, I guess, in my opinion, I feel like they're manufacturing it, or they're calling there's other explanations for what they're talking about, but like I'm not going to disrespect someone's experience by just outright saying that to them. But I mean, that's just kind of my opinion. And my opinion doesn't matter anyway. But I never had any of those kind of stories. The closest thing I had to that was, I think, like one time I was really depressed. I felt like I I didn't hear like a voice or anything, but it was just kind of like an instinct I had to go listen to this specific track on a Fred Hammond CD. I don't know if you know who Fred Hammond is.
No.
But yeah, that's the problem with like a lot of like white Christians. Like they never listen to any black Christian artists. You know, I was like, yeah, come on, like you guys know Fred Hammond. But no, like there's like a specific song on there that was just like the lyrics kind of like spoke to me, or like what I was going through in that moment. It was just about praising God and just about things you've been through or whatever. It wasn't like, you know, like this is the first time I actually really said this to anybody, because I feel like now when I think about it, it's just so like it's not even really a story. But at that time I felt like, oh, this is guy kind of like, you know, I guess I was trying to have that moment. You know, I wanted to have that moment, so I kind of manufactured it for myself.
Yeah. That's not unusual at all. I mean, I feel like what you're
Yeah.
describing is so many Christians have had those moments where they're really, you know, they're wanting God's guidance, and they're looking anywhere they can to try to find it, you know?
Yeah.
So when did it change for you then? So, I mean, this is all kind of going on. Was there a moment that you kind of thought, you know, I don't think I'm a Christian anymore, or?
I was still agonizing with God up until the point when I left Southern in 2010.
Okay,
like that's
so
probably
you
when
graduated and you were still struggling with it.
Well, I didn't graduate from Southern. I only did 2 years there, but
Okay.
that's when I left. And I mean, it was too expensive. I didn't know what I wanted to do. There was a lot of factors for me leaving.
Okay.
Was still trying to figure out God's will, and I was still, you know, I felt like I was pushing the limits. It's like, okay, I'm fasting, I'm diving deeper into the Word, I'm going to Bible studies with, you know, the serious Christians, and not hanging with like the wayward people as much, and you know,
Yeah.
I'm trying to cut out, you know, like my TV, my secular music, and like, you know, like I was trying to do all the things that's like, you got to do these things. So I'm like, okay, I'm
Right.
doing all these things, and you know, I'm not just doing them just to like not go to hell, but I'm doing them because I want to hear a word from you, or like something, anything, you know. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be, you know, my prayer would always be like, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, amazing, fantastical, supernatural, like whatever, but just something that is like clean cut and direct, and I know it's you. Like that's it.
Yeah.
You know, and you can make it whatever you want to be. I'm not even gonna like
Right.
throw anything out there.
You're just looking for clarity.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
and you know, I just never got anything. It's starting to frustrate me more and more. And my mom and I, we were hitting some bumps in the road at that time. There was I went to Southern in 07, 08, and then I took a year off. Because I didn't have the money to go back, and I was trying to work. And during that time, there was a time my mom and I got into an argument, and I ran away from home.
Thanks for listening to Voices of Deconversion. Be sure to join us next time by subscribing to the podcast. If you'd like to learn more, check out our newsletter at bodpodcast.com.